I say the 10-year-old boys that we're having all of the difficulties with throughout America, from the inner cities, those who join in gangs and so forth, if there was somebody, some adult could enter their life before 10 years of age to say, you good boy, or who they are. But if somebody instills that self-confidence in you, by the time you're 10, you're on your way like a plane. The biggest ambitions I had was to have a room of my own, to have a bedroom of my own, to have a house of my own. It just so happened that my father was a very skilled mechanic. He was a good man, very reticent, very quiet gentleman, until he had one drink of alcohol. Then he became a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And many a week, he didn't appear for Monday's work, didn't appear for Tuesday's work, but he'd come in Wednesday. But between Wednesday and Saturday noon, he'd done 2 weeks' work. So they kept him on. We lived in 19 different houses by the time I was 17. So as I was saying before, one of my greatest aspirations, dreams, and hopes was that one day I'd have my own room, because I had to sleep in the living room on the couch. My 2 sisters had one bedroom, my mother and dad had the other bedroom. My dad sometimes had the habit, when he came home intoxicated, of being violent. And many a night it was unsafe for my mother and my 2 sisters and I to remain in the house when he came home intoxicated. And one of the lessons I learned early on was that no matter what happens to you that's adverse in life, that you had to take it with a grain of salt, and you had to learn to laugh at your adversity. I remember distinctly one night I refused to run out the house because I was about 9 or 10, and I was studying. Had a kerosene lamp sitting by this little table in the kitchen. And Dad came home about 8 or 9 o'clock drunk. My mother and my 2 sisters ran out the house. My mother said, "Come on." And I said, "I'm not coming, Mom. I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm studying." Dad came in and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm studying, Dad." "You making good grades?" I said, "Certainly." "Well, forgive my language. God damn it, you're a Reese. You're supposed to make good grades. Where's your mother?" And I said, "I don't know." Just then he took his right hand, he went to slap me, hit the kerosene lamp, and I ran. And I ran out of the house. The moment Mother saw me come under the house, she started laughing. She said, "You weren't going to run out, huh?" Now that may seem to you, or in this day and time, to have been a very insensitive statement to make to a 10-year-old under such circumstances. But I learned from my mother, no matter how bad things were, they could be made into comedy, and you had to learn to laugh at what happens to you that's bad and appreciate only the good. Mother was a strict Seventh-day Adventist. She was a very religious woman, but also a very joyful woman, no matter what happened. There were many happy memories. I remember a surprise birthday party they gave for me one time on Dixon Street in New Orleans. They had skates in those days that made out of metal wheels that you used and you attached to your shoes, and you skated on the sidewalk. There weren't skating rinks for us in those days. I don't think there were any in New Orleans that I know of. But Dad had made me some from the rollers that came from the bakery equipment that he was repairing, and they were rubberized wheels, and I could solidly skate past the other kids. It was a very fond memory I had. Then I had Audrey, my older sister, who was really religious, which taught me not to take of the collection out of the plate to go to the show when I was friendly with the minister's son. When I was about the 3rd grade or 4th grade, Daddy came to the school, drove everybody out in a drunken rage. So Mrs. Ruth Steele was my 3rd grade teacher. Everybody's running out of the school, elementary school. Miss Ruth Steele grabbed me to her ample bosom, and she said, "James, That's your daddy. But you're a good little boy. You're gonna be all right. And to this day, I remember the feeling I had when she hugged me and told me that I was gonna be all right. In spite of my 94 years, I remember distinctly that moment. It was one of the turning points in my life. But Feeny, my sister, was the one who pushed me. I remember when I finished high school, I wanted to go to the University of Michigan to enroll in the School of Journalism because I wanted to be a writer. I had $60 saved, and that was in 33 or 34. I'm fishing funds with that $60 to pay a semester's tuition and room and board. But then Feeny, she asked me the $64 question. She said, that's good. You have enough for the first semester. What are you going to do the second semester? And like a smart 17-year-old, I said, I don't know. I wasn't worried about it. She said, if you stay here in New Orleans and you go to the Teachers Normal College, I'll give you $1.25 a week, a quarter a day, and I'll buy you a linen suit. I had no suits. $1.25 in those days was like giving a kid now 17, $500 a week, maybe $1,000 a week. I don't know. So I stayed in New Orleans and went to the Normal, and then became a teacher for a year and a half in New Orleans before I was drafted into the Army. An interesting experience happened in the Army. I was drafted, I was a private, and I was called to the regimental headquarters of the regiment I was drafted into. And there was this regular Army sergeant, regular Army man. There was a big difference in those days between regular Army men and women. And he said, they're looking for a postmaster. He said, but I'm not going to send you there. I'm going to keep you here with me. One of the turning points in my life. The next day or so, I was out drilling with the other soldiers. Sergeant Harrington, the one who was the regimental sergeant major, came out. Asked for Sergeant Anderson, who was my company commander. Anderson said, Adjutant, could I see you a minute? Yes, sir. So he said, Private Reese is in my charge. No more drilling for him. He reports to the office every morning. That meant I didn't have to go through the ordinary drill every morning out there in the cold and rain. And he helped me tremendously. 9 months later, I went to Officer Candidate School. I had sent in the application 5 times through channels. Each time it was rejected. The 6th time, they accepted it. So I reported to Fort Washington, Maryland in October, I think. In August of 42, I think it was. And 600 in the class, all white boys. I had never been to school in all my life with a white boy. And I'm walking through the barracks that night when I reported, and I see not a black face. And finally, I see one black face. John Royston, who later became my great buddy. I was shy, so much so that before graduation, they called John Royston in to the commanding officer, and his staff called John Royston in to ask him, do you think Sergeant Reese will make a good officer? He's so quiet. He said, yeah, he'll be all right. They got his approval. You see, in those days, the Army was not integrated. An order came down from headquarters, Army headquarters in Washington, in writing, and we would get it in the Adjutant General's Department, that no black officer could have an assignment where he would be in control or oversee a white enlisted man or a white officer. Before the year was out, after I was assigned to Fort Huachuca with the 93rd Infantry Division, there were about 20 black officers in the Adjutant General's Department doing nothing They were assigned to the general there. They could not be assigned to any other division because there were no other divisions where there were black officers. But at any rate, I'm happy I was inducted to the Army. I had many good experiences in the Army. And if it hadn't been for the Army, I could not have attended law school at USC. We were there at USC during the war years. I went to USC in '44 in February, and we graduated in February of '46. While there at USC, on the Bill of Rights, on the GI Bill, we were assigned counselors. My counselor was able to get me a job working as a janitor at night. While I was in law school, I had a leave of absence from my teaching duties in New Orleans the first year. The second year, Feeney called me or wrote me and said, you better renew your leave of absence because how do you know you're going to finish? So I renewed it. Then I'm practicing law now, 1 year, 2 years. She writes me again, why don't you renew your leave of absence with the school board here? Because how do you know you're going to be successful practicing? Then after I've been practicing about 19 years, up one day, she says, you're going to be a little old lawyer all your life. She wanted me to do more. Anyway, after 19 years and this call from my sister Feeney, I realized I had to move on. So I undertook then the attempts to build a foundation to get appointed. I knew I had to go political. So I opened a campaign office for Charlie Warren in the 56th Assembly District. I hadn't met him, but I gave a fish fry in my backyard and raised $360, enough to pay about 3 or 4 months' rent. And it just so happened he was a good friend of the governor's. And he recommended to the governor to consider me for an appointment. When I was interviewed by Charlie Christian, who was the governor's executive secretary, I said I was too young to be a judge. So I got a job with the state, setting up the neighborhood legal services offices under the War on Poverty program that was in effect at that time. And I served 2.5 years on the governor's staff, setting up neighborhood free legal services for poor people under the War on Poverty program. And then when Reagan came into office, we knew that that program would be decimated, which it was. And that's when I realized I had to do something else. And I went to work for Ray Charles Enterprises as House Counsel for Ray for 2 years. And also applied as a commissioner with the Superior Court. I got a call in June of the second year with Ray. That Monday I had to take that position on and give it to somebody else. And I decided that I would take the position as a commissioner of the Superior Court, where I served for 5 years. In the meantime, I'm working with Tom Bradley and other politicians trying to get the appointment. And I finally got the appointment in 1975 as a judge of the municipal court out in Compton. And then I served there 5 years and went on to the Superior Court in '80 until my retirement in '88. I was a judge with the commissionership for 19 years altogether. Then after that, I worked with an organization called JAMS, Judicial Arbitration Mediation Services, Inc. We retired judges acted as mediators or arbitrators. I did that for 20 years. So I had 20 years of practice, private practice, 20 years on the bench, 20 years as a private arbitrator mediator. I just stopped doing that last year. I learned a lot. Sitting on the bench is not what I thought it would be. I thought that, number one, you had a lot of power, because we think of judges as having power. But when a judge exercises indiscreet power or excess power, he's in deep trouble. A judge's position is a position of humility. Somebody's right, they think. Somebody's wrong, they think. And all you're doing is letting them prove it. If I had any wish in life that, any reason to believe I should have done something else, it would have been that I should have tried to become a legislator. I should have tried one day to eventually have become the Secretary of Education in somebody's cabinet who's president of the United States. And the reason I say that is very simple. Without education in America, you don't exist. I think what's happening to America is that we're getting further and further separated by educational class, not to mention economic class, because that goes hand in hand. The more illiterate people you have, the more dysfunctional people you have in a civilization, the greater the difference and the chasm is going to be between the haves and the have-nots. At 94, I'm happy, I'm blessed, and I thank God for all the blessings in the life that has been bestowed upon me. I'm completely happy and thankful with my life. The only regret I have is there is no dress rehearsal, because there are a lot of things I would like to do over again that I might have done differently.